Hello, I'm Angela Princewell, and on this segment of Ask AP, I'm answering the question my wife asked me for child support in April 2023, but wants me to pay all the way back to January 2022. Why should I pay when she didn't ask? Um, I know, I understand. Um, Unfortunately, child support is one of those issues or one of those scenarios where a person doesn't really have to ask to be entitled to it. So, in most cases, if there's child support generally flows based on sort of the parenting arrangements that are in place for the child. So, if a child is living with the recipient, the person that's asking for child support primarily, then the expectation is that the other parent will provide support to their child, and it's really just the law. The law allows, is written to allow the courts to order child support back several years from before. And the obligation for that just really flows from the fact that you have a child. It's really just that simple. And so if a person there it's different from, say, a scenario like spousal support, for example, where you're expected to ask, you're expected to show entitlement. With child support, it's just simply you have a child, and there's an obligation to financially support that child. And unfortunately, ignorance of the law is no excuse. But the fact is, I recognize that a lot of people do not know this, right? They're thinking, well, I can support the child in other informal ways, right? So I've had people, providing financially for the child based on what they see as the need for the child, but not in that structured way where it's the actual table amount of child support being paid. And so years later, there's difficulties when the other party says, well, I want child support. And now a person is caught up in a situation where they have to show their financial contributions, or in most cases, they just have to end up paying retroactively. And it's not an unusual, it's really not an unusual situation. And even sometimes we've seen people in shared parenting arrangements, for example, where both parties decide, well, we'll both take care of the children according to our abilities, right? When they're in our respective homes, we'll take care of them, and there's no need for child support. In fact, most people actually think that if they're in a shared parenting arrangement, that they don't need to pay child support, and that's not true at all. There might be an amount payable. It wouldn't be the full table amount because there's setups that's done, but there could be a child support obligation there. So when you're making these arrangements, it's always good to seek legal advice so that you know what you're getting into. And if in fact you both, with information and with proper arrangements being made for the child, decide that you don't want to pay child support in accordance with the table, then you need to have that entered into as an agreement. So if you just have sort of this informal scenario going on where we're not, I'm going to take care of the child and you do so as well when the child is in your care. Well, unfortunately, if one party changes their minds and wants child support, well, it will be granted. It really will be granted. Now, it might become a mathematical exercise of figuring out how much, you know, the payer has already contributed, how much might be a set of amount. There'll be, of course, other considerations such as hardship and things like that. So there are tests to go through, and I'm not necessarily saying that because a person's making a claim for retroactive child support that they will be successful. I'm simply saying that there is basis for them to do that. There is reasons why the courts will accommodate that conversation, and the success or failure of that claim would definitely depend on the circumstances of your particular situation. So as outrageous and as crazy as it might sound that someone's just asking today for child support from so many years ago, it's the law. There is legal basis for doing that. So just make sure, speak to a lawyer, see if, there's ways that the obligation can either be set off, if there's no, if the claim is baseless, for example, make sure that it gets thrown out in a timely manner. And most importantly, if you're not already paying child support consistently, then do seek independent legal advice so that your lawyer can look at your parenting arrangement and make sure that you're paying the proper amount of child support so that you don't continue to accrue arrears as time goes on and before the issue gets resolved. So I hope that answers your question. If you do have a child, please remember that you do have an obligation to support the child, and that's independent of anything else, request, need, whatever the case may be. It's not enough that the other party just says, don't pay child support or just bring me whatever when you can. You want to make sure that if it's structured. If it's not structured properly based on the table amount that are in the child support guidelines, then make sure that you document your exception. And be careful with that as well. It's not enough to just say, well, we've agreed we would not get child support, because child support is considered the right of the child. And so if the other party changes their mind and decides to pursue child support in spite of your agreement that you shouldn't get it, then they will still be successful because the courts would say, well, it's the right of the child, and it really wasn't up to the recipient to kind of waive that child support. And by waiving it, the idea is that the child is the one that actually gets to suffer. So policy considerations just kind of come in play there, and generally that agreement would likely not hold. But if there's other arrangements you're making, maybe you're providing, housing for the child at rent free, so in lieu of paying the table amount of child support, then document that, right? And so that if anything ever comes up in the future, it's clear that reasonable arrangements were made for the child and that the child is properly provided for financially. So it's unfortunate that this is the situation, but it is not unusual. It is actually quite common for people to seek child support retroactively. So just take care to protect yourself, and starting today going forward, just make sure that you're paying the proper amount of child support to avoid any hardship on yourself further down the road should the court make sort of a lump sum amount for child support. So I hope that answers your question. And until next time, it's bye for now.